Hey there everyone, I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and I am feeling fine with episode 49 of the Weekly Ratchet. Today we're gonna buy. As we talk about how you like to procure your new games. I'm also gonna talk about an old classic and some new hotness in recently played games. So let's dust off our wallets here on the Weekly Ratchet. Hey there everyone, and welcome back to the Weekly Ratchet. Thanks for joining me here on the channel, and thank you all of you who have participated, chatted, joined in, whatever, in our 1 year celebration last week. That was a lot of fun. The cake looked better than it tasted. The quick funny story with that was I wanted to do a custom cake. I just thought that'd be cool, and the only place we could find that could do it was like the cheapest grocery store in town. So it looked great. Didn't taste that great, but that's okay. Hey, sorry this Ratchet's coming out a little late this week. I usually try to film these things on Sunday, usually, maybe film Sunday, edit Monday. But lately, a lot of my buddies have been inviting me out to gaming on Sunday, and of course, I want to do that. I kind of need to do that to make this show work. So I did a little filming over the weekend, and then went and played some games on Sunday, and just kind of didn't get around to the Ratchet. I recorded it yesterday. It didn't really come out good, so now here I am on Tuesday recording, and hopefully I'll get this out later on today. Anyways, like I said, I did some filming, some editing over the weekend. I have my first Dice Tower review ready to go. I don't know when they're going to get it scheduled, but I took a look at the Project Gaia game. The game's not very good, but we did have a lot of fun with that video, and I think folks will enjoy it. I definitely, I did a couple of little different things with that. Instead of the big opening skit, I did a couple little jokes in the video, and so I think those are going to come out pretty well. We had a lot of fun doing that. Also want to thank folks for welcoming Douglas to our family. I'll throw a couple pictures up here. Douglas had a little surgery last week, kind of typical thing that you have to do with pets, unfortunately, but he came out of it doing just great. He's recovering very well, and he was kind of avoiding me a bit last week. Towards the end of the week, I think he was like, just stop touching me. You're always poking me and cleaning me and, checking me and whatever. He's like, just leave me alone. This week, he's kind of started coming around a little bit more and being a little bit more affectionate. Anyways, that's what's been happening here. I don't have any new games. In fact, I didn't even think there was going to be a Ratchet this week because as of Friday afternoon last week, I had not played any games, but I got a bunch of stuff in over the weekend as far as stuff played. So I'll chat about those. I have no new games to talk about. So let's go ahead and get straight to the question of the week. All right, last week I asked you to tell me where you like to purchase your games from. What venues do you like to frequent, whether they're in person, whether they're online. I told you could pitch a local game store if you wanted. We didn't get very much of that. Also asked how often you purchase games and maybe how many games you get a year. Only a few people mentioned that, which of course is perfectly okay. Lots of comments to get through, and you're going to see a lot of sort of common and recurring themes, but everyone sort of has their niche that they like to go for, which I thought was kind of interesting. So let's go ahead and open it up with CR Poll, who said that he buys games pretty infrequently, that he's backed a few on Kickstarter, but as he typically shops for older games, he makes a fair number of his purchases on eBay. That makes a lot of sense. I remember you talking about that in the past, that you kind of tend to go for some older games. And I'm wondering if you've ever tried the Board Game Geek Market, which, is sort of it's actually, a lot of the games that you'll see on Geek Market, you may also find on eBay. The same seller selling the same game, the same pictures, whatever. But I've used it with some pretty good success as well. Sometimes you can get slightly better prices than eBay, but it depends. Anyways, thanks for that comment. Ty McDonald said he usually purchases games at game shows, often because that's where he's at anyways, so why not? That makes sense too. Obviously, we ran into each other at PAX Unplugged, and that's a place I like to get a lot of games there as well, because I feel like some of those conventions, especially at PAX, you get a lot of people, a lot of kind of like shops, a lot of stores that have set up there, and so you actually still get some of that competition. Even though you're at a convention dedicated to board games, you can still tend to get some pretty decent prices. So that makes pretty good sense. Thomas Greaves said he typically buys games through crowdfunding and online. He added that he supports his local game store during an annual garage sale, an event where you can buy used games at good prices. Lastly, he said that newer games and expansions are simply too expensive to buy at full retail prices. That makes sense, and we're going to see some other comments about that through the rest of this, that folks they're just not comfortable paying full price. And I think that, for us hobbyists, for the folks who are going to watch a YouTube channel about board games, we have a lot of them, or at least we tend to, sort of collect them at a different rate than perhaps your typical consumer. And, maybe your typical consumer is not really going to worry too much about MSRP. They don't know go and check online. They may check Amazon. Okay, it's not for sale there, so I guess I'll just buy it here. But because we have so many games, obviously we want to try and get good prices. So that makes a lot of sense. Simulation Chris said he lives in a country where English isn't the primary language, so he does most of his shopping online, but added that he'll sometimes pick up a language-independent game at his local store to support their business. That also makes sense. And I think, we're sort of challenged a lot in this hobby to support your local stores. And I get that, and it's good that we can do that. We just can't always do it all the time. You, for the reason of not being able to get a game in your language, and also possibly because, again, we want to kind of save money, right? So that makes good sense. Just Joe Blogs said that he has 2 game stores, neither of which are local, and at least one of which isn't very friendly. As a result, he buys most of his games online, but will buy from game stores that sell online, noting one that is pretty popular in the UK where he lives. He said he'll often avoid Amazon or eBay as he doesn't want to risk getting counterfeit games. That whole counterfeit topic is an interesting one, and it's a whole other discussion. I have not personally run into counterfeit games. At least I don't think I have. But I know that it's a problem, and I know that it's a big problem on Amazon, especially. I've not really heard of it too much from eBay, but I'm sure it can happen there as well. And I think that it's interesting, and I think it comes up here later on in the comments, that some retailers or some publishers will actually point you to Amazon to buy their games. The company that makes Everdell, I can't remember their name off the top of my head, something Tycoon, they'll push you towards Amazon. Here's our sort of our store on Amazon. So at least in that instance, that you're getting a legit copy because the publisher themselves are pushing you to that store. But you might want to watch, because if you start seeing other copies of the games from a retailer that you don't recognize, and the price is too good to be true, there's probably a reason, but that's really good advice. Penny said she lives in Canada, so most of her purchases are through Board Game Bliss or 401 Games. She has also crowdfunded some games, but has been cutting back due to shipping prices. I've also bought some stuff from Board Game Bliss. I think my copy of Hi-Fi came from there. It took a little while to get here, but I have purchased from them in the past. And the shipping thing, that's so tricky, because shipping prices have come back down, but they're still up there. I think it's just kind of the normal price increase. It's not going to ever get back to 2019, right? But at least I don't think it's as bad as it was in 21 or 22. But you've got that conversion rate to deal with, which is definitely a bummer, and I can understand that. Teshra said that he mostly buys games from online retailers, that the few times he's visited a local game store, it just hasn't sat well with him, either due to staff who want to tell him about products he doesn't want, or being overlooked by staff who favor the regulars who tend to hang out at the store. And Teshra had said a lot of stuff there, and I probably couldn't fit all of it in the screen, but it was an interesting topic. It was an interesting sort of point that he brought up. And the one comment you made, Teshra, was sort of being a little introverted and going those situations and not necessarily feeling very comfortable. And I certainly understand that, and that's a very valid point, very valid concern. I think it's maybe an interesting thing to consider, though, is that again, the people who watch a YouTube channel about board games, the people who watch this show, and certainly myself, who are hobbyists, we have a lot of games, we collect games. As you said yourself, you probably know, you're very researched. You go into that store knowing what you want, knowing what you're looking for, maybe even knowing what you should be paying, that kind of a thing. We're probably not really the people that those staff are there to help, right? They're there for the person who walks in who goes, What's all this stuff? This is really neat. Wow, games. I didn't know there were more games than Monopoly and Scrabble. What should I get for me and my friends? And so it's difficult, right? I get that maybe, I walk into a store and they go, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, no, I'm good. Trust me, I'm fine. I'm just kind of browsing, and same thing. I know what I'm looking for, or I know what I would like to find, but I definitely don't need any help. And so, I kind of get it, but I also get it from their perspective. And I think if in most cases, if you just kind of tell someone like, "Hey, I'm good. If I need anything, I'll let you know. Thanks very much," they'll typically kind of leave you be. Again, it depends on the store, but I think that's kind of one thing to kind of keep in mind, is that, maybe we don't really need them but somebody probably does. And hopefully those folks are getting the help that they will benefit from and get introduced into this hobby. It depends. Jeremy Brooks said he gets most of his games from Amazon as his nearest store is nearly an hour away. He said he'll occasionally buy from the publisher's website and will back games through Kickstarter on occasion, suggesting an annual budget of what he'll typically spend on games. Which I kind of had to laugh about as I looked at that, and I thought, yeah, it's about maybe a quarter, fifth of what I tend to spend on games during a year. Guilty. What am I going to do? I have months where I don't buy anything. Obviously, the first 2 months of this year, I haven't really bought too much with the new pet and kind of just everything going on. But bonuses are about to land, so that might change. Anyways, Katie and Greg of the Meeple Society said they buy most of their games from local stores, but also like to visit game stores when they travel, acquiring stuff along the way. They also utilize a few online stores and also Facebook Marketplace. Now, I do want to point out for my viewers that Katie and Greg live in what is arguably the world capital of board gaming, at least here in the U.S., and that is Indianapolis, Indiana, the home of Gen Con. There are hundreds and hundreds of gamers in that area, and I'm sure that they can go on Facebook Marketplace and find just tons of games for sale. I can't imagine what like the trades and the flea markets are like in that area. It's got to be absurd, and I am crazy jealous. But all that makes sense, and I've known Katie and Greg for a long time now, and I've always thought it was cool when they do traveling, when they're going across the country or whatever. They'll stop at game stores all over the place and post pictures, and sometimes even go to publisher stores, and just pick up all kinds of stuff. They literally kind of like plan room in their car for, okay, on the way back, we're probably going to have a lot of games that we didn't leave with. So anyways, jealous for sure. Wonderflonium said he buys from online retailers, but also mentioned that the Dice Tower virtual flea markets as a great way to pick up games. I haven't really dealt too much with the flea markets, and I can't even really tell you why. I think a lot of times when I'm traveling for Dice Tower stuff, I'm flying. And so, obviously, space is a big issue for me. I mean, good Lord, coming back from the retreat last year, or was it Dice Tower East? I can't even remember. But I literally just had to carry games, just like in my arm because I just had no more room left in my luggage. But anyways, those flea markets can tend to be pretty nice. Sometimes you get a lot of, like, the heck is this stuff? And some of it would be from me because it's the stuff that Dice Tower has given me to review. But anyways, yes, those are pretty neat opportunities to pick up some games. Rebecca, a first-time poster, said she gets games from a variety of sources, adding that if she hears of a game that she thinks she'll like, she will find it. She said she too likes to go game shopping when traveling, adding that a new game is better than a generic plastic souvenir. I actually agree with that. I can think of a couple times I picked up games while I've been traveling, and yeah, I kind of tend to remember like, oh yeah, that game, I got that when we were here doing this, whatever. Even though it may not, the game itself may not have anything to do with where I was, it still sort of creates that memory, sort of creates that association, if you will. And so that's a pretty neat idea. A nice comment. Thank you for joining us here in the channel. David Garrison, another first-time poster, said he feels no obligation to support his local game store as there is no value added when they charge full MSRP for a game. And I get that. I really do. And I've made this comment to folks before. We're kind of told as hobbyists, oh, don't buy from Amazon. You're supporting a mega corporation and not your local game stores. Yeah, but I have like 400 games, all right? And if I overpay or pay full price on every game I have here, that's like an extra few thousands of dollars that I've kind of pissed away. And so I get it. For us as hobbyists who have a large collection of games, you gotta find ways to, sort of pinch the pennies and purchase smartly. We're strategists, right? We're playing games. We gotta be smart about these kind of things. You don't want to pay too much, right? Because then it's going to open you up to make more purchases later on down the line. So I understand, and welcome to the channel as well. B. Driscoll, yet another first-time poster, said he buys a lot from Kickstarter and his local game store, but said he's been getting great deals lately off of eBay and Board Game Geek. It's a great way to get a hardly played game for half the cost, sometimes with an expansion thrown in. Absolutely. And like I mentioned, the geek market, it's a little weird in how it works. It seems a little more loosey-goosey than eBay. But typically, if you're buying from someone on Board Game Geek, you're buying from a hobbyist gamer who wants to make it a good experience on both sides of the table. And so I've always had good luck with the geek market. I'm glad you have as well. And you're right. You're getting games that have been very well cared for and maybe even have some. I've gotten organizers already in the box. I've gotten sometimes cheat sheets in the box. People have already printed out guides or things that they've gotten off of the geek, like lists or files or whatever, things that they've kind of added into the game to help players, and that's been fantastic. So I think those are good sources, absolutely. And again, welcome to the channel. Really happy to have all these first-time posters. That's been awesome. Ecto Fox said he too likes to try and get used copies, but says he'll generally just try to find the best price he can when looking for something new. And my good buddy Doug Hager said he doesn't buy very many games, but has gotten them from online, his local game store, and at conventions, namely PAX U in Philly. And lastly, Tony Lawhorn mentioned his local game store, Hobbytown in Lincoln, Nebraska, adding that he's also purchased games at conventions like Gen Con and Origins. And so, yeah, you're seeing a lot of sort of common themes. You're seeing folks who kind of maybe focus on particular markets, and that certainly makes sense. Sometimes you got to kind of work with what you have, whether it's, again, location or language barriers, or, trying to get better prices on shipping, and all that makes good sense. I tend to buy stuff from kind of all over the place. I have bought some games from international online stores. My copy of Die Tavernen Tiefenthal, The Taverns of Tiefenthal, I got directly from Germany right after it came out. I didn't wait for it to hit the US market because I was really excited for that theme, and that is still one of my favorite games. I also have expansions to the Rallyman Dirt game, which have never made it to the US because of all the debacles that publisher, who is now bankrupt and out of business, went through. But you were able to get expansions from a company in Italy. Very, very expensive, but I did get them, and they're still in shrink on my shelf, so not sure if that was a wise purchase, but whatever. I've also used eBay, Board Game Geek, all that kind of good stuff. Also here in the Richmond area, we have a store called One-Eyed Jack's. Nice store in sort of Carytown, Richmond area. The problem is they're pretty pricey, but they do tend to have a ding and dent section, and I actually think that they buy those games on a discount in bulk, and will pass those savings on to us. So actually, I got a copy of the Skyrim board game, the Modiphius game. Really, really good price on Ding and Dent, and I really couldn't find anything wrong with the box. It had a little bit of a ripple, I think, in one of the corners. Nothing that bothers me in the slightest, but they sold it as Ding and Dent at 35% off or something like that. And of course, then I went and I bought the expansions online because they didn't have those Ding and Dent. They had those at MSRP, and I think I saved something like $50 buying those two things online. So kind of split the difference, right? A little bit from the store, a little bit online, so on and so forth. We also have a store down in Midlothian area, south of the city, called Battlegrounds. I don't get down there very often. They tend to have slightly more obscure stuff, which is kind of nice. One-Eyed Jacks doesn't quite have the inventory. They also don't have the space. But Battlegrounds is big on the Warhammer stuff. So they have a ton of Warhammer. Tables all set up for Warhammer. You can't really play board games there very well. They used to do some gaming events prior to COVID, and those all kind of went away. Anyways, so yeah, those are kind of the avenues I like to go through. I've also talked about, we've had some local flea markets. We had the math trades, which are a great way to get games. You're kind of trading in that instance, but we have those. And then we also have, the game, the Unplugged Game Cafe down in the Midlothian area, where you can just go and play stuff. You don't have to really buy anything, maybe some food, pay a couple bucks to use a library, and that's about it. So decent stuff here. It ain't no Indianapolis, Indiana, but decent stuff here. All right, let me go ahead and share some recently played games. Here we go with some recently played games. Now, I mentioned I hadn't played anything prior to Friday, and then all of a sudden Friday afternoon got to check out a bunch of stuff. And I'm going to kind of go through these in a slightly different order because I want to start with the small stuff and end with the big stuff. So first, we played, my family and I sat down for another session of Button Kingdoms. This is from Samuel Barmettler. It is a deck building game. Now, what I will say, and I kind of honed in on this a little bit with this recent playthrough, was that it's an unpredictable deck builder. It doesn't have that aspect where, okay, it's my turn, I'm going to go shop for the cards, and I'm going to buy these cards, add them to my deck, and I'm good. You only ever get to make one purchase per visit to the market, and even then you may not get to purchase anything because there is this sort of a real-time market. And it's a really interesting concept. It really is. And that you have these 3 cards out there, and there's 4 spots around each of these cards for each player, up to 4 players, to put a token. You have 3 tokens. You're going to put one of those tokens on each of the 3 cards in the market. And one of those tokens is going to say, I want to buy this card. The other one's going to say, I want to sell this card. And it actually has a number on it. So you're kind of selling it for that price. And the other token says, I want this card to go away. I want to trash this card. And you're putting out all those tokens. And then once everyone has put those out in secret, you flip them over and you kind of reveal each card one at a time. If someone wants to buy a card and at least someone has said they want to sell the card, then that card will get sold to that buyer. Whoever has the lowest sell price out there will get to sell that card to the buyer for that amount of currency, which is buttons in this game. If multiple people want to buy the card and there's at least one seller, then that seller gets to pick who gets to buy the card. And again, buttons are exchanged and the buyer gets the card. But if you've said, I want to buy this card and no one wants to sell the card, or if everybody wants to buy the card and no one has decided to sell it, then nobody gets it. And in fact, if multiple people want to buy it and at least one person has said, I want that card to be trashed, if it does not get purchased, it goes in the trash. And so you kind of run into these instances where you're like, I really, really want that card. But I'll bet you everybody here wants that card. So what the heck am I going to do? And it makes it a little tricky. And I went a couple rounds in this playthrough where I did not get any cards. My wife and daughter got cards, and I kind of just felt like I was always behind the 8 ball a bit. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that, as I mentioned, the cheapest seller gets to sell. Well, I had the number 7 token. It's the highest token in the game. It gives you priority when you go into the combat phase. So if there's someone who's about to get knocked out, you can be the person, hopefully, to get to knock them out and get those points. That's a benefit. But when it comes to selling, I'm always going to get undercut by anyone else who wants to sell that card. However, I did get to go 3 turns in a row where I managed to sell a card at my full $7 price or 7 button price. And I thought that was kind of neat. That was kind of fun. There was also an aspect of this which I did enjoy in this game, and that was that you have a champion card. It's kind of like your character in the game. And that champion gives you an evening action that you can take. You have a day and an evening phase, day and night phase, so you get a nighttime action that you can take. And it also sets up a unique endgame scoring option just for you. You don't get to take that action until you reveal your champion. So you get to kind of like, haha, here's who I am, and here's how I can score. And now I can take this evening action. Well, my scoring benefit or scoring option was that I would get a point for every card that was in the trash at the end of the game. And my bonus action was that I could double the effect of a card and then trash it. But since I was having so much difficulty getting cards, I never wanted to activate that ability anyway. So I kept my character face down. I was discreet about who I was. And then I spent most of my turns at the market trying to make sure that the least popular card would get trashed. And did pretty well with that. There was like 26 something cards in the trash by the end of the game, so I got a bunch of points off of that, revealing my character in the very last round and having my wife and daughter go, oh crap. So that was actually pretty fun. Like I said, from the deck building aspect, being that I really, really love deck building games, I don't love the unpredictability of that market. I don't love the sort of randomness at which I just don't get to buy a card because of the way that people play their chips. But there's a lot of stuff here that I really do enjoy. And my daughter really, really loved this game. So I will be starting some content on that actually this week. I don't know if I'll get to it today, but I do plan on getting to filming here ASAP. And I think we're going to have another really fun video on this one. We're gonna get some friends involved. There's gonna be maybe some pets appearing. I think it's gonna be a pretty good video. That is Button Kingdoms. Up next, I'll chat about this one. This was Patterns. I talked about this a couple weeks ago. This is one of the only games I've bought this year. This is a mandala game from Lookout Games. Now, I haven't done my homework on this. I don't know what a mandala is. I don't know if that's an actual thing or if they've just kind of made up that word, because in their previous game, Mandala, which I have over here on the shelf, you have a cloth mat and it has a specific arrangement that you're putting cards into, and once you have one of each color of card in a mandala, it gets destroyed, and then players kind of draft the cards in the middle of that display, which then become points. And both of these games have this aspect, this idea in that you have 6 colors in the game, and you're acquiring things in the game. In the mandala game, it's cards. In this game, it's these kind of little circular cardboard tokens with sand on one side and just the image on the other side. And as you acquire them, they're worth points in the order that you acquire them. So the first one that you get is only worth a point each. The last one you get is worth 6 points each. And the challenge with that, of course, is that you're going to have a lot of opportunity to grab the 1 point tokens throughout the game. You're not going to have a lot of time to grab those 6 point tokens. So you really want to time that last acquisition of whatever it is, whether, again, it's destroying those mandalas in the first game or sort of building these groupings of tokens in this game. You want to try and get as much of that last color as you possibly can, as obviously there is a ton of points to get at 6 points apiece. 6 points a piece. This one I liked a lot more than the Mandala card game. The Mandala card game is fine. It's a good game, but it's funky. It's a little sort of tough to understand what you're trying to do. The strategy is not, I think, readily inherent in that game, and you really kind of, it's a twister, a weird puzzle. This one makes a lot more sense. You're simply trying to build these patterns. You've got this sort of grid of these tokens, and they're all going to start face up with like a little depiction of sand on them, and you're putting out tokens. You're swapping tokens on the board. You always have one in your personal supply, and you're just trying to build a grid, a area, if you will, of these tokens of the same color touching each other orthogonally, and you have one of them that has a point token on it, and that sort of dictates the range of your area. The neat thing is that it was very, very fast. It was pretty easy for us to understand, although the rules on the first action that you can take were not well written. You actually had to refer to the example, because it says, well, you can trade an item, put an item out. It doesn't actually say that you're taking the item back from the main board. It was left out that step. But once we figured it out, we were able to play this thing twice in maybe 20, 25 minutes. And I really enjoyed it. It is a very thinky game. You're playing almost in silence because the turns are really, really fast. Sometimes, my wife would be kind of finishing her move and I'm already moving for my next thing because she didn't do what I wanted to do, which is good, and I could take the action. Anyways, I really like this. If you're looking for a very fast but still thinky, non-take that two-player game, this one highly recommend. Patterns from Lookout Games. Alrighty, up next I was invited on Sunday out to my buddy's place, and we played Caverna, the Cave Farmers. Now, Caverna is kind of a classic game. I don't know that I would call it an evergreen. The idea of an evergreen being that it'll always be popular, it'll always be alive, it'll kind of like an evergreen tree. It'll always be a game that people will seek out. I think that's more the case for its predecessor, Agricola. Both of these games are very similar, and I meant to look this up. I think they're both from Uwe Rosenberg. But they are farming games. And in Agricola, they're both worker placement games. You're putting out workers on these actions. Throughout each round, you actually get more actions that are added into the game. And in both of these games, Agricola and Caverna, you kind of have a field, and then you have a housing area. You start with a very small area, and you have to kind of expand your house. You have to, you can add rooms to the house, let you do things on the field. On the farm side, you can put out fields, you can put out animal pastures, all that kind of stuff. And that's the same for both games. However, in Agricola, there are some rooms that will come out. There are some specialty cards that will come out that I think you either draft them or you just get randomly dealt them at the beginning of the game. It's been a long time since I played Agricola, and I've done most of that on Board Game Arena, actually. But it's random. It's different from game to game, which is certainly fine, but some people didn't like that. And so Caverna is much more measured. You always have the same items out on the market. Everything is always sort of the same thing, except for that the order in which some of those extra actions come out slightly varies from game to game. Now, my buddy Mike, who invited me out, did have an expansion to this game that adds some of that randomness back in, and I did not know that. I had prepared to play it, wasn't prepared for that random element to get added back in. But what this does is each player then gets to pick between sort of like two factions. They get to kind of pick who they want to be. I was the Dark Elves in the game, and it changes up your rules a little bit, changes up your scoring a little bit, and also can change out some of the buildings in this market. But the nice thing is that you still generally have everything available. You still know everything at the beginning of the game. You know what there is to work with, and he had even printed out some cheat sheets, some things that we can kind of reference while playing and didn't have to, constantly get up and move around the board. Now, with both of these games, they're farming games, they're worker placement games, there's a little bit of an engine building mechanism, there's kind of everything there that I would tend to enjoy, but I've always been terrible at Agricola. I've never scored well, I've never won that game. I had a copy. I actually ended up getting rid of it because I don't know. I cannot figure out that game, and Caverna was no different. I finished last place with half the score of third place. And the thing with these games is that as you play, you have, 12 rounds or 6, whatever, some number of rounds that you're playing through. It's measured. It always the same length of game, always the same number of rounds. But you go several rounds with a family of 2. Maybe you get to expand the third person, and that's the whole idea, is you're kind of breeding children to get more workers, which is key to a worker placement game. But then somewhere around round 5 or 6, you suddenly have to feed your people. Okay, fine. Then you go another couple of rounds, you got to feed your people again. Okay, fine. And then all of a sudden, you're feeding them every single round. And so not only are you trying to get more workers, but suddenly your focus becomes, holy crap, I have to feed these people. And now they're eating a lot of food because I have a lot of people. And so it's this weird shift. In the beginning of the game, you can just focus on playing the game. I'm going to build my engine. I want to expand. I want to get some animals. I want to do all this cool stuff. I want to play with these buildings. And then the last half of the game, it's, I need food. I need all the food. I need to feed these sons of... And I have never enjoyed that shift. I have never enjoyed that sudden panic of, I need to feed these people every single round. And now I have 4 or 5 people. That's 8, 10 food I have to have, or I'm going to lose I'm going to lose points at the end of the game. And it becomes so frustrating. It becomes this crazy, I just need to slaughter everything that I built at the beginning of the game gets murdered to feed the family at the end of the game. I know that one game that has kind of spurred off from Agricola was Brew Crafters. I think I've talked about that before here in the Ratchet. I haven't played it, I think, ever since the show started. But it's sort of based on Agricola, but you're running a brewery, and it has this idea that you have to pay your operating costs every couple of rounds, just like Agricola, and it's worker placement, just like Agricola. But it's very measured. Every 4 rounds, you have to pay the bills. And so you know exactly when you have to pay those bills. You're always sort of working at that same interval, and it just always seemed so much more predictable and much less chaotic because, like I said, you're not doing that more often throughout the game. You're not suddenly just pressured to, I just need to make as much money as I possibly can. You can still focus on an expansion, knowing exactly when you have to pay the bills, knowing what the bills are going to be, kind of all that stuff. So I'm glad I got to play Caverna. I'm really glad I got to check it out. It's been on kind of a bucket list for me to play for a long time, but it's just not, it still didn't click with me any better than Agricola did, and I still don't like it as much as I do the Brew Crafters game, which I do think is out of print, so I don't even know if that one's available these days. But that was Caverna, the Cave Farmers. Okay, that night I did actually convince my wife to play another game, and we played Bargain Quest. Yes, Bargain Quest. I almost said Bargain Hunters. I was really excited for this game. I mentioned this one a couple of weeks ago. I got it in the math trade here in town, and I must say that I was really quite disappointed with this game. The idea here is that you are running a shop. Instead of being the heroes that are going and fighting the monsters, you're selling the merchandise to the heroes who are going and fighting the monsters, although they still kind of go and fight on your behalf, and so you're still kind of just fighting the monsters yourself, which is fine. That wasn't an aspect that I had an issue with. You get these hero cards, you get a bunch of item cards, you have a storefront that you're kind of managing, you get to put a card in the display window, which I thought was really cute, and based on the appeal of that item, will determine who gets to draft the heroes first from a common supply, which is usually equal to the number of players, but we did play a 2-player variant where we actually had 4 heroes, kind of changing the game up a little bit, supposedly making it more strategic. I think it made it a little bit more chaotic, but it was okay. So we got extra items to work with. You're drafting these heroes, and then you're selling these heroes these items. You can't sell them when it's on display, which is interesting. The other thing that was interesting was that each hero has 1 or 2 suits, which are just colors, red, blue, yellow, green. The items that you're selling have, maybe 1 or 2 or 4 of those colors, and you can only sell a hero an item that they're able to work with. It has to be one of their same suits. And so we had a couple rounds where it was just all blues and greens. It was all we had from heroes. But you're drafting items from this deck, and we had a lot of reds and yellows that we couldn't sell to anybody. And so I even had a round where I sent out a hero with nothing. Came in, didn't find anything of interest, then waltzed out the door empty-handed, and they died. We also had a round where, so in the first round of the game, you draft your heroes, you get your items, you sell what you can, and then you go into a combat phase. Well, the first thing you do in the combat phase is that each hero gets a little card added to them. It's a little modifier. I can't even remember what it's called in the game. But they get this little card that they get assigned, and they can modify their stats. So each one will typically have some base stats in attack and defense. That's it. You're adding items that increase their attack or defense. And then they get a modifier, which could turn around and decrease those values again. So you kind of send them out knowing what they've got, but then at the last minute before they go to fight, those values can get changed. And they go to fight the monster, bad guy, villain, whatever it may be. They have to be able to meet or exceed the defensive value of that hero or of that enemy to do damage to it, and then the enemy will do damage back, and your hero has to have an equal or higher defensive value to the enemy's attack value to survive. And if they successfully attack, you get a point. If they survive, you get a point. And some heroes even have other benefits. Hey, if they manage to attack and defend, they'll get you an extra point. And all that was fine, except for in my first round, both my heroes died. They didn't do any damage, and they both died. My wife managed to damage with both of them, and one of them survived, so she got 3 points. I had no points right off the get-go. I'm like, okay, well, that might be a little difficult to recover from. In the next round, a nobleman came out, and I really enjoyed the theme of this. It was this, a guy with more money than brains, right? No fighting skill. He had 0 base stats, nothing. He also had no suits. You could sell him anything, and he had a ton of money. And I thought, I like this. I just like that theming. Like, the I don't know, king's rich son who thinks, I'm going to go on and defend my castle, even though I have no idea what I'm doing. And I just thought that was really, really neat. I managed to get that guy. I sold him a ton of stuff, and actually knew that he was going to go into combat, and he was going to succeed. He was going to damage the enemy. He was going to survive the fight. I was really excited with this. And then he draws his random modifier card, -2 to both stats. Didn't do any damage. Died in battle. And that was a turning point for me, because it was like at that point I had been really excited for this character. And then because of a random card flip, none of that panned out. I got no points from that guy. I think my other guy got maybe 2 points. My wife got, 5 points, whatever. And so immediately, again, I just fell further and further behind. And I didn't enjoy that. I didn't enjoy that most of your decisions were dictated just by random card draws. The items that you draft may or may not work for the heroes that are on the table. The modifiers that you draft, may just make you lose a fight, and you have no control over it. There is a variant where you can take those things out, and I think we're going to try that next. I think my daughter can handle this game, so I'm going to continue trying to make this work. There are some expansions for it too that I'm hoping will kind of, just increase the strategy of it. Hopefully not adding more randomness. Hopefully, giving us more to work with. I did like the theme. I liked a lot of the game, but I just didn't care for the randomness. Anyways, that was Bargain Quest. All right, last game here to chat about is the big one. The big hotness right now is Star Trek Captain's Chair. This is from David Turczi and Nigel Buckle, the same designing team behind Voidfall. Not as heavy of a game as Voidfall, but not that far off. This is based on the Imperium deck building card games. This is a deck building game. In the Imperium games, they're civilization games, and you have multiple different decks from multiple different civilizations. Some of them are real, like the Romans. Some of them are fantasy, like the Atlanteans. Even the latest version has Martians. You can play as an alien faction. And in this, your different decks represent sort of different series of Star Trek. So you have The Next Generation. There is no Captain Kirk original series in here yet. Winky wink. You've got Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine. I think there might be the Enterprise show, and there is a bit of the Star Trek Discovery. There's a Star Trek Discovery deck. There is not any Voyager, again, yet. You do have, I think, a Romulan deck, and there's a Klingon deck. I don't actually know who those characters are. I think they're either from movies or something. I'm not really sure. I don't know everything Star Trek. But one of my more favorite themes, favorite IPs for sure. Anyways, the thing with these games is that there's a lot of rules. And the reason for that is that each of these cards has a wide variety of keywords. So I'll give you an example. The words gain, scan, take, find, and enlist are all slightly different versions of ways of getting cards. Scanning and gaining is usually from the market. Finding is usually from your deck or your discard. Enlist is from a separate deck that you have. And I think those go into your draw deck. And this just proliferates all the cards in this game. And so much of this was flipping through the rule book and like the 6 pages of glossary at the end to go, okay, what does that word mean? Because find or take can have very different implications. And so you're trying to like, okay, well, I really need to get this card, but which one of these cards is going to actually let me get that card, and where is it going to let me put that card? And so it's one of those games where, again, you spend so much time just buried in the rule book because the words that they've used don't make the most sense. They're not inherently clear as to what they do, and you have to kind of understand what they think those words mean versus what you think that word might mean. Also, I got to say the theme here doesn't make the most sense. I was excited as I was reading the rules in that you can beam characters and items and cargo onto your ships. You can beam them to planets. You can move stuff around in this game. And I thought that was really cool, except for that you find that once you've beamed something to a location, whether it's a ship or a location, a planet, whatever, it doesn't do anything anymore. It loses most of its powers. The only thing that applies is whatever its like faction or its unique sort of stats. All these cards have icons in them, just like Terraforming Mars. Okay, I had a shapeshifter, Starfleet, engineer, whatever. And so as long as he's in play, I have a shape-shifting Starfleet engineer. And so if I have a mission that says, well, I have 3 Starfleet in play, that guy counts as long as he's out there somewhere. But his special abilities, all the things that he would let me do if I just played him as a regular card, doesn't apply anymore. And so you have this weird thing where, okay, well, I need this card in play so I can get something else done, but I'm not going to get to do anything that this guy normally does, even though he's still in play. And I just started to fall apart in terms of what this IP does, what this theme sort of means. None of it really connected that well for me. Also, you're trying to put these, you've got a couple of locations out in front of you that you and your opponent, it's only a 2-player game, are fighting over. And once you have sort of the commanding lead and you can claim that location, everything that you have there just kind of goes away. Your ship gets discarded, all the crew who are on it get discarded. Now you're going to get them back, they'll cycle back through your deck, but you don't know when, you don't know what order they're going to be. You can't then take that ship, okay, we've accomplished our mission here, and now we're going to zip off and go do something else. And I get it, I get that for the deck building game, that's how they did it, but thematically, it just doesn't make any sense. It loses the connection with what Star Trek is about. It was also kind of weird that, first I played this as kind of like a solo training mode. I won't really go into that, but I do like that it's in this game. It's also in the Horizons Imperium game, and that you can play solo, and you don't have to manage an AI. You just kind of you're just working for a certain point threshold, and it's really just a practice game. The solo rulebook is like 15 pages. I will probably never play the official solo mode. I'm just going to keep doing the practice game because it's just less work. Anyways, I then played it 2-player with my wife, who was very, very kind to play this game with me. She doesn't really know anything about Star Trek. As a deck builder, it's a weird one. It's a very complicated one. She actually did really well with the rules. There really wasn't a lot of questions. There wasn't a lot of okay, I have no idea what this means. The strategy was hard for her to grasp, and she didn't do very well with scoring, but she was able to grasp the game. Anyways, it was weird that she was Captain Picard, I was Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine, and we were fighting each other. There's even attack cards that you can play, like steal things from opponents. That would never happen, right? Sisko would never attack Picard. I mean, Picard was a legend, and anyways. So that also was kind of weird, and I think that when I compare this to the Imperium games, this one was a little less clunky. There weren't as many cards in the market. The setup wasn't as complicated. But Imperium, I think, is a better game. I think Imperium, the structure of that deck builder makes more sense in a civilization game when there are no friends, right? You're all vying to be the best civilization. That still happens today, right? But here, it just doesn't work that well. So I love Star Trek, right? There's going to be expansions for this, and I will buy them because I'm an idiot and I'm irresponsible. But it just isn't. It isn't what I was hoping for as a Star Trek fan. And I think that if I'm looking for a deck builder that is complicated but makes more sense, I'm going to stick with the Imperium games. Anyways, that was Star Trek Captain's Chair. All right, real quick before I wrap up the show, I didn't get any entrants, any participants yet for the sort of revised Ask Me Anything, and this is not an Ask Me Anything. I don't want to call it that. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but I really do want to add a segment to the show where folks can send in a question, maybe something that they want help with. They want something, maybe they want to better understand deck building as a mechanism. Maybe they want to better understand worker placement, or hey, what's a really good worker placement game that I should get for me and my wife, or me and my game group? And I want something where we can kind of help each other. Again, this isn't just me giving you my advice or sharing my opinions. This is, hey, how can I help you out to better enjoy the gaming hobby? So if you have a question, share it in the comments. You can email it to me at tabletoptoolbox@gmail.com. You can also join the Tabletop Toolbox Facebook page and ask there. And like I said, I want this to be a further discussion, sort of community interaction. Let's help each other advance in our gaming hobby. Question for next week. I've seen a recent trend. There was a new game announced, Azul Duel. Now, I used to have all the Azul games. I got rid of all the ones I didn't care for. I've only kept Summer Pavilion. But there's been this trend of making duel games. Seven Wonders Duel, which is, I think, probably one of the better ones. I've seen, obviously, the Azul Duel. There was Dwarf Romantic Duel. There's all these games that are taking just popular games and trying to strip it down into a two-player game, but usually with a bit more of a take-that mechanism, usually with a bit more sort of conflict or combat. There's been a lot of questions out in the community of, do we really need these things? How many people are really buying these things? How many people want to play a more aggressive two-player version of these games? And so I'm wondering what your stance is on these. Do you have any of these dual games? Do you like the dual games? Or is it something that you've kind of tended to avoid because of how aggressive they can tend to be? I'm curious what your thoughts are. I don't really have any of them myself, except for maybe Seven Wonders, and that's probably about it. So curious what your thoughts are on Seven Wonders Duel. All right, folks, I think that ends the episode for this week. Thank you for watching. Thank you again for all the new posters, all the new participants, and I'm hoping that we'll see some more participation from you folks here on the channel. Until then, I'll see you soon. Cheers.